It's the third line day. We have gate 34, the gate of power, and the third line is called Machismo. We saw that the first line knows that it has power and that may have to use its power to protect itself to survive. We know that the second line projects out this power and can be found to be weak inside, that paper tiger syndrome. When you get to the third line, you get to Machismo. You get to the real display of power. Remember something about the nature of the third line. It is the adaptive line. It is preparing the ground for the transpersonal process to come. It knows that there is something else at work because it bumps into it all the time. It might not exactly know, oh, it's a 57 or a 10 or a 20, but it knows there's something. And the other thing is that because it's trial and error, it will make mistakes in its display of power. And we have the lifetime learning that says the indiscriminate display of power. The first line says the indiscriminate use of power. And the third line here says the indiscriminate display of power. The first line is there to use its power. The third line is more mouth than fists. Through trial and error, they discover that it's dangerous to always use your power. It could backfire on you because you don't know who the other is and what they're packing. The exaltation says the great malefic, where machismo is unfortunately, invariably backed up by power. Is that right? Hold on. Sometimes I say these, I think, yeah, I've got that. The great malefic, where machismo, unfortunately, is invariably backed up by power. That is what I said, isn't it? So that's fine. Thank you. This is an exaltation only in that it is natural and not contrived. The display of power that defines any role. The third line is saying, I cannot be a surviving human being unless the display of power is part of my role. These people will look for ways in which they can display their power to enhance their survival success. In other words, I will not succeed as a businessman unless I am really powerful and display my power and have a corner office and 14 people making me coffee whenever I want it. I will not succeed as a partner unless I bully my partner and make them do exactly what I want. This is a need to display power in any role to guarantee the survival of their way. It's not necessarily correct, of course, but it's their way, maybe it's their conviction. And of course, it might be correct. This is something that sometimes is so hard to wrap your head around that it can be, if someone is responding to that correctly because they know who they are, then it's going to be correct. I have a friend, as I was going through one of I can't remember which gate it was now, but it was something to do with, was it the 14? It's all, I have forgotten. But we were talking about something that Ra said, that whatever you do, you could be a pimp. And if you are doing it correctly because you believe in it, it must have been the 14, I think, because it's something that you believe in, then it's going to be fine, or it is fine, isn't it? It's that sort of, I'm trying to find which line it is now, but open head, it probably doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, I think it was 14. But then what we got around to talking about was that if you are being correct, truly correct, because you know your type, your strategy, your authority, you have that idea of who you are, then are you really going to do something that involves manipulating other people or, using them in that kind of way? It's hard to know, isn't it? I don't know, because we have an exalted view of people who are correct, but it is an exalted view. It maybe not play out that way. I don't know. I don't know. Ra said about this gate particularly, but the trial and error part of it in the third line, that there can be violence here. Violence can come out of it because of the trial and error, and also because of all that frustration that builds up in this 34th gate. It's a display of power, and unlike the mistakes that become part of an awareness process, every role can become, so they can become imbued with this. The mistakes have to be discovery. They have to fuel the process of discovery. Otherwise, then they serve no good. And this is another thing, isn't it, with our third lines? We have this judgment on them that they are full of mistakes, always making mistakes, trial and error, that error thing. Error equals mistake. Mistake equals bad. We're not supposed to fail in this life. We have a fear of failure. But what our third lines do constantly is bump into things and discover what works and what doesn't work. And they do it for the rest of us. You know, the third line is so much a part of way of how we survive on this planet, because the third lines, they go in and they do it, and they, it's a life of adventure for them, you could say. But they do it and they make their discoveries. So it's playing with words, and if we don't have word prejudice, we don't need to play with the words. But hey, I mean, most of us have a word prejudice about something along the way. So it's a thing that the trial and error, they have their process, they bump into things, and then they assimilate their discoveries. I'm on one today, aren't I? My 2-4, my missionary is out to play. Think about what individuality carries in its individual strain, in that way that it expresses. You know, we have the 39th gate of provocation, that's individuality. All of the moods that are involved in that. We have the 38th gate, the fighter. So when you're dealing with individuality, you're dealing with a genetic structure that is designed not to be interfered with. And at its extreme, it will get violent in the defense of its right not to be influenced. You know, integration is the most individual of all the circuitry. In its pure form, it is about self-empowerment. It's survival of the self in the now. The intuitive awareness of how to do that, and the power to be able to carry it through. Yeah, this is incredible. And it's not even a full circuit. It's really just classed as one channel. It's an amazing thing. This system, oh my God. I mean, just every now and then I just can't. I'm so grateful to have discovered it, because it blows me away day after day when I look at this and think, this is extraordinary stuff. Missionary again. I'll get myself a dog collar. When you're looking at the power that's inherent here in the 34, most of the power is used to get people out of the way, because it doesn't want to be told what to do, and it doesn't want to be told how to use its energy. So the power it has, or the nature of the power in the 34 and the 14 that we've just come from, it's there so that the individual can withstand influence, but it also gets in the way of them being open to guidance, of course, because they can just put those walls up, and they do need guidance. You know, they don't understand the collective and the tribe well enough, and they need to be guided as to how their potential, their mutative capacity can find a way in the collective or to the tribe. This is where the role of the 4323 comes in. It's the only channel that can reach the 3420 and guide it. It's the only one that the 3420 will allow to guide it. And it's also individual, and it also understands how it all works. It's part of the mechanic again. So they need guidance, a very specific kind of guidance, and it's there for them. But it's difficult for them, because their power wants to deny anybody the right to influence them. And so they will automatically display it, particularly in this lower trigram, because they're not ready for the other. And they don't know what part of the other it is. They don't know what's going on out there. You know, they have this gift, perhaps, of being able to guide them successfully to victory or mutation, to the expression of those things. But it's lower trigram. They don't know for sure. In the detriment, a reasoned and calculated display, the communication of disinformation, the calculated display of power in order to define the role. That's a common trait. There are a lot of 34s that just use the power without actually engaging in the use of that power. In other words, they can put out a display that seems so threatening that it acts as a preventative, so that they don't really have to use their power. You know, you can scare people by the tone of your voice, so they just don't want to get involved in attacking you at any level, because they don't want that tone to get any worse than it already is. The whole thing is that if you call their bluff, they actually still have the power. So it's not a good idea to call their bluff. This is not necessarily a paper tiger. Very often the 34-3 just has to display their power. You know, their threats may not have legs and they may not really mean what they say, but the power behind them is enough that people will still do what they want. There are certain roles that require that kind of display of power. Nothing can be done about that. That's the nature of beings, after all. Nature of being human. When push come to shove, got to be ready. It's a very competitive field. It's a third line planet. We are here to survive. And there are all kinds of competition things going on out there, yeah, that are going to impact survival in the world on all different levels. And the reality is that certain roles need to have this power. Otherwise, you can never get to the sixth line. You know, you are never going to get to the completion of this process and the potential for wisdom that the sixth line holds. The 20th gate in the third line is called self-awareness. This is trial and error in the now. And of course, there are going to be mishaps along the way, and they get bumped into and they bump into others, and it can be a very physical experience. You know, there could be all sorts of discoveries made in that bumping process. But could there be the possibility that the self-awareness softens the machismo of the 34-3? I mean, does the machismo need softening? That's another thing, isn't it? Bringing some perspective, perhaps, to the indiscriminate display of power. I mean, this is possible. Maybe, maybe not. If it's in your detriment, you get to play it out until you condition or decondition enough not to play it out anymore. The moon is still in gate 59, the sacral gate in the defense circuit. It moves into gate 40 next at 10:23. Another tribal gate, this time in the ego circuit, the gate of aloneness and deliverance. This is a love gate. It's the love of work, and it's in the ego center, so it demands a strong bargain around work and rest because it will bring its phenomenal willpower to the work that it will do for the tribe, but then it needs its alone time. And then we have gate 64. This is in the head center, the gate of confusion at 21:37. This is collective abstract circuitry. It's a visual kind of experience up here, but the images tend to be all jumbled up, hence the confusion, and they need to be made sense of somehow. And this is the job of gate 47, which is next on the moon's journey. Now it comes in at 8:56 tomorrow morning. The gate of realizing is the 47. This is like the video editor taking all those jumbled images and making a cohesive movie out of them. The 64-47 can be an uncomfortable experience. The thoughts keep on coming and there is no sense to be made out of them until there is. This is a cyclical journey and it's related to the emotional wave. Clarity comes when it does. There's no truth in the now. What to do? So that's our third line. I will be back with a fourth line tomorrow. Until then, as always, look after yourselves and go gently.